Good evening. A federal judge today ordered the New York Times to suspend temporarily publication of a series of reports based on a secret Pentagon study of how the United States became involved in the Vietnamese War. The order will remain in effect until Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Judge Murray Gurfein said any temporary harm resulting from the suspension will be less than the irreparable harm that could be done to the interest of the United States government. The judge scheduled a hearing on a possible permanent injunction for Friday morning.
Wow. That was an NBC Nightly News report from June 15th, 1971 on the court order to suspend publication of the Pentagon Papers. That court case was later decided in favor of the New York Times and the Washington Post and their First Amendment freedoms. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the Times publishing its first article in the series, the Defense Department's secret study of the United States' role in Vietnam. Kurt Andersen joins us now. He is author of the best-selling book, Evil Geniuses, and host of a new podcast out today entitled Nixon at War. Also with us, historian and Rogers Chair in the American Presidency at Vanderbilt University, Jon Meacham. And Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Susan Page, Eugene Robinson, and Richard Huss are still with us as well.
Thank you all so much for being with us. Jon Meacham, first of all, talk about the importance of the Pentagon Papers in U.S. history. Talk about the firsts, all of the firsts that the American presidency and the press experienced 50 years ago.
Well, in a lot of ways, the distrust in government, the sense that there is a deep state working against the interests of common people, a very populist trope, finds full expression in Pentagon Papers. You had a government commission study about how the various administrations had essentially misled us at every point through that war. It's published in 1971. I think it was the same weekend as Tricia Cox's wedding, so Nixon was distracted, but not too distracted, to become and he lashed out in reaction to the leak, which exacerbated the conditions of Watergate, which in turn helped create the suspicion of government. And so I think one other thing, just for the home team, to some extent, it's also kind of the coming of age of Katharine Graham and Ben Bradley at the Washington Post. The Times follows the injunction. Gene's home base steps in, and they obtain their set. They publish. It's an incredibly brave moment for the Washington Post and helped elevate it. And of course, we know what happened then over the next 3 years with the Washington Post because of the fall of Nixon. So you have this moment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jon. I'm sorry we have a delay. I thought you stopped. Go ahead.
No, just real quick. So, you know, there were some conspiracy theories that endure after Pearl Harbor, but they didn't. They're on the right wing in the fever swamps. Pentagon Papers is different. Vietnam is different because in some ways it's a respectable conspiracy theory, if that makes sense. It is the case where the government misled us. And so there's a healthy distrust of government. Of course, what we're living through now is that's been taken to a deleterious degree.
You know, it's so interesting you talk about how this is where a lot of the distrust in our leaders came from, this sort of deep state conspiracy. I remember after watching Ken Burns' documentary on Vietnam, looking at it and actually saying, even though it wasn't his intent, looking through it and going, my God, this really did lead to the rise of people like Trump and lead to where we are now, even 50 years later. Kurt Andersen, your podcast provides this 7-part series. It's a sort of a fly on the wall type look at the Pentagon Papers and this crisis, this political and journalistic crisis unfolding. And you even have never before heard clips, including one that I'm fascinated to hear, one from the Nixon Frost tapes.
Yeah, we do. And it's really about Nixon's handling of Vietnam, his extension of the war. He was elected, of course, to be the tough-minded guy who would finish it quickly. He didn't. He extended it and extended it and extended it. And then finally, even when he knew he was going to lose, or the United States was going to lose, said, well, you just got to make sure the communists don't win before November 72. The Pentagon paper, of course, came in the middle of that. He was about to go to China. He was about to grab the big brass ring, and Vietnam was just a distraction. When the Pentagon papers came out, which, by the way, wasn't bad for him. It was about the Kennedy and Johnson administrations and Henry Kissinger. We have Henry Kissinger and Nixon at war coming in and saying, "Oh, Mr. President, this isn't going to hurt you. This isn't going to hurt us. This is bad for the Democrats." But it sort of triggered Nixon's paranoia, which was a long-standing feature of Richard Nixon, to go nuts, to become the Watergate gangster, to this week, 50 years ago, order a break-in of the Brookings Institution, the big liberal think tank in Washington. Order it on tape, and then order it again as the Supreme Court was about to hear the Pentagon Papers case. This is the moment, and then this summer of 71, when he went off the rails. And part of it was that he was hiding his own secrets that we talk about in Nixon at War, of how he, as he was running for president, did all these illegal shenanigans to mess up Lyndon Johnson's peace talks and not let Hubert Humphrey and the Democrats have a big win right before the election. So it's a complicated thing. And, Joe, I didn't really fully realize how deeply intertwined Vietnam and Watergate were. And it's all of a piece. And it's so just a part of the American tragedy, as John and you have been saying, about the undermining of American solidarity and faith in government and all the rest. But it wasn't two things: Vietnam, Nixon's handling of it, and Watergate and his downfall. And then we're still living with the consequences. I mean, as you say, Donald Trump, the silent majority idea, the way Nixon pitched himself as the man of the regular people against the.
Oh.
I think Kurt froze. We'll get Kurt back. Susan Page, in the Pentagon Papers, and a great point was made. This really wasn't just about Richard Nixon. In fact, it really was very damning towards LBJ and even Kennedy. And again, I talked about the Ken Burns documentary, but you look at all of this material and you see John Kennedy, before being assassinated, saying, "They hate us over there. There's no way we can win that war, but I can't get out of it until after the election." LBJ realizing very early in the White House that there was no way that the United States would ever succeed in Vietnam, but he didn't want to be the president that was seen as losing the war. And so here you have three presidents, one who had military advisors over there knowing it was never going to work, but kept them over there, one who actually started the hot war, the active war, and one who claimed to finish that war. All three of them lied to the American people when they knew there was little to no chance of success.
And, the Pentagon Papers were important not only because of what we learned about the presidents, as you just mentioned, it's what we learned about the power and authority of the press to examine its government. This was a crucial court case affirming the right and the appropriateness of reporters to use secret sources to examine what their government was doing in the name of the American people. And let's not forget the courage of the journalists who were involved in this. Daniel Ellsberg tried to get the Pentagon Papers out using a member of Congress. He couldn't find one. He went to journalists at the New York Times, later these joined by the Washington Post. And the journalists involved in this understood that it was possible that they could face legal consequences, even criminal convictions. It wasn't clear until the Supreme Court ruled that the right of the press to do this was affirmed. And these are, of course, debates we continue to have today as we look at the leak investigations that the Trump administration has done just in the past few years, things we're just beginning to learn about.
Gene, talk about the coming of age of the Washington Post, of Ben Bradley, of Katharine Graham having to call the shots, making that decision that she knew put your newspaper, then her newspaper, on the front line of history.
I mean, it was incredibly brave. I did hear from friends and colleagues at the New York Times after Steven Spielberg's film The Post came out, that kind of makes it kind of diminishes the New York Times' role in initially publishing the Pentagon Papers. They were first, but the Post at a moment when it was clear that if you published, there was going to be trouble. That Nixon was going to come after you in a major way, and that Katharine Graham could have lost the newspaper, literally, in the fallout from publishing, and she and Ben Bradley and Howard Simons and others of that greatest Washington Post generation made the decision to go ahead, the brave decision to go ahead, which was ultimately vindicated. And you have to, remember the context too in which this was happening. The demonstrations against the Vietnam War on a scale and of a kind that we haven't really seen since. I mean, we've had a lot of upheaval and turmoil in this country, but Vietnam was this consuming issue.